Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you today. I realise there are quite a lot of archaeologists in the audience who probably already know quite a lot about Portable Antiquity Scheme, what we do and why we do what we do. So I don't intend to sort of dwell too much on that. But many people are actually unaware of how we came into being. Even in the archaeological community. So I want to spend some time talking about how PAS came into being, what we do. And then I want to talk about treasure items, because that's what people want to talk about. All of the illustrations that I've got in my presentation are from the Wrexham area, with the exception of two, and you can see if you can spot which two those are. And then I want to talk about the non-treasure finds that we've been finding in and around Wrexham County Borough. There are 1,472 of them on the database, but don't worry, I'm only going to pick out a few of my favourites, so you will get home before midnight. So I'm going to start by talking about me. I'm an FLO, a Finds Liaison Officer, although I like to think that FLO often stands for Funny Little Objects, because that's what I spend most of my life actually doing. As an FLO, I can be recording anything from things like this, an Acheulean hand axe, an object that was not found in the Wrexham area, I hasten to add, right through to Victorian clay tobacco pipes. We try to record everything that we can that is at least 350 years old, but regrettably have to be a bit more selective about some of the younger material, simply because of issues of capacity. And this morning we've heard quite a lot about Roman activity in North East Wales, but I hope you'll be able to see from the presentation there's actually an awful lot more going on as well in some of the other periods. So what about PAS then? How did it come into being? This is what it actually says on the Portable Antiquity Scheme website, and I've got a link down at the bottom there for those of you who haven't come across it. Prior to the Portable Antiquity Scheme, finds would have been taken into a local museum for recording, but that only really accounted for a small number of objects, and the vast majority of objects that were being found by members of the public were going unrecorded. As you'll be aware, context is everything when it comes to objects, and it's vital for us as archaeologists to know about where they came from, what other objects that they found along with, in association with, to help us understand past human activity. So potentially all of these unrecorded finds meant that we were losing a lot of knowledge of archaeology and the history of both England and Wales. So in March 1996, proposals for both a voluntary and a compulsory scheme for the reporting and the recording of non-treasure finds were put forward, and views were sought from lots of interested parties, including professional archaeologists and metal detectorists. The response to those proposals was that recording of all archaeological finds was important, and that a consistent voluntary scheme to the recording of finds should be established. Now, in July of that year, the Treasure Act was passed, and this is still the legislation that we work with today. And the Treasure Act kind of almost replaced the medieval law of treasure trove, although treasure trove is still actually used as well in certain circumstances in both England and Wales. And the new Act was actually to give protection to some archaeological finds that were classed as treasure, and was a way of encouraging the reporting of such finds. But it didn't help the vast number of other objects that were being found by the members of the public that didn't qualify as treasure. If an item is classed as treasure, then there is a legal requirement on the part of the finder to report that find within 14 days. But with all other finds, the scheme is purely voluntary, and although finders are encouraged to report their non-treasure finds, there is no legal requirement in England or Wales to do so. There are different rules if you're in Scotland. Scotland still operates a kind of a treasure trove system where everything they find is actually recorded, and that process is actually being reviewed at the moment, actually. And on the Isle of Man, everything has to be reported to the National Heritage Agency, and anything found in the sea or around the seashore is reported to the receivers of wrecks. But anything that you find on the land is purely voluntary to record that. Now, by December of 1996, the Department of National Heritage, which is now DCMS, announced funding that will provide 2 years programme for 6 pilot schemes starting in September 1997. All of these were in England at that time. And they were set up in Kent, Norfolk, the West Midlands, North Lincolnshire, the North West, and Yorkshire. So quite a large area of England where these pilot schemes were to be run. An FLO, or a Finance Liaison Officer, was placed in each region and this was coordinated by a further post, which was based and then funded at the British Museum. The FLO's job was to provide a point of contact for finders, just as it is today. They were to record the finds, provided that they didn't qualify as treasure, and then they would return them to the finder. Initially, the finds were recorded on the host organisation system. So if they were based at a museum, they would often use the system that museum had in place. Often these were paper-based, but in 1999, a central database was actually set up. During that first year, the pilot scheme recorded over 13,500 objects, and it was quite clearly very successful. But further funding was clearly needed to extend the scheme nationally. And after a number of successful bids, there was financial support from the National Heritage Lottery Fund, and it was finally possible to establish a comprehensive national scheme covering the whole of England and Wales. And we have the sort of the front face of the PAS scheme, the Finds org, which is run through the British Museum. That's the database that both the English and the Welsh finds go into. And then we have the front page there of PS Cymru, which is based down in Cardiff and funded through Welsh Government, Cadw, and the Libraries and Archives Council. So between us, we run through 119 different national and local partners, as I say, including the National Museum down in Wales. And there is currently a network of about 46 Find Liaison Officer posts based in museums and county councils throughout England and Wales. In Wales, PS Cymru, we worked along a number of, this is a map showing you where all the FLOs are based. Sadly, there are still the same number of FLOs now as there were back in the 1990s, so we are working at capacity. Wales was a bit of a strange, had a bit of a strange setup because we had one PAS officer based down in Cardiff for many, many years. And then my post was created about 7 years ago, and although I'm employed by National Museum Wales, I'm based up here in Wrexham. But in Wales we have, of course, the Welsh Archaeological Trusts and PAS work very closely with them. We all work together. So the little green dots are where the HENEB offices are based, and then the 2 PAS offices. So we've got reasonable coverage of Wales now, although there is a bit blank area in the middle that we're trying to work on. Now, PAS don't record objects from professional archaeological excavations, but we do occasionally incorporate data that has been recorded by other institutions. So in March 2010, the records of the Oxford University Celtic Coin Index were added to the database, and as was the Cardiff University's Iron Age and Roman Coins in Wales project. As of yesterday, that's the total of the number of objects we've recorded on the database. And I only did it as yesterday rather than this morning because I'd run out of time this morning. But this figure goes up by about 100 to 200 objects every single day. I mean, it's constantly building. The database does have a certain number of biases in there that you have to take account of, unfortunately. Because it's a voluntary scheme and we only record those objects that are brought to us by the finders who want to have their objects recorded, there's a bias there. There's also a bias that's introduced with relation to capacity of the FLOs and what we can record. I mean, there are only so many hours in the day, and 24/7 recording, as much as it would be lovely to do, it isn't practical. But anyway, the database is there. Now, one of the elements that gets talked about with the scheme a lot is treasure rather than the everyday objects. And this is something that actually only forms a very small part of what we do on a day-to-day basis. PAS is linked to the treasure process, and this is something that the FLOs and the PAS will guide finders through, but it's legal legislation that's laid down by the government, and ultimately it will be the coroner that makes the decision as to whether or not an object qualifies as treasure, not the PAS or the FLOs. I won't go into a lot of detail about what does and doesn't constitute treasure today, because that's a whole other lecture, but I did think it would be nice just to run very briefly through the basics and to illustrate some of the objects that are found locally that have qualified. So these are the sort of the 4 criteria of what qualifies as treasure under the 1996 Treasure Act. So the first one is any metal object other than a coin that's at least 10% by weight, gold or silver. But it has to be at least 300 years old when found. So from Wrexham, you've got some of these beautiful objects here. We've got a Bronze Age lock ring, one of a pair, and they are now in Wrexham Museum. You'll be able to see those once we're back up and running. There's a very nice medieval silver ring with an inscription around it. It actually says Jesus on the outside of the ring. And we have a nice silver gilt dress hook from sort of the Tudor period as well. Sadly, it's not terribly well preserved, but there's a little bit of the gilding left on it. So those are quite clearly objects that would qualify as treasure under that first category. Second one is any group of 2 or more metallic objects of prehistoric date that come from the same find. So these don't have to be gold or silver, but they do have to be prehistoric. And so the obvious thing would be a hoard. This is a nice late Bronze Age hoard that was found not in Wrexham, unfortunately. This was from Conway up near Abergele. One of the first excavations that I actually carried out as part of my job as the FLO for North Wales was to go and retrieve these objects, which is wonderful, absolutely wonderful spot. And we had great time with the finder up there. So amazing collection there that qualifies as treasure. 2 or more coins from the same find spot, again, that have to be gold or silver. But if you're lucky enough to find copper alloy coins that are Roman, you need to have at least 10 of them before you have hit that magic target of being treasure. A couple more here from the Wrexham area. We've got 6 silver denarii, rather sad-looking silver denarii, but they were all found in association together from the 2nd century, and then a wonderful collection of medieval coins. There's some nice silver coins from the reigns of Edward II, Henry V, and Henry VI. And then any object, whatever it's made of, that was found in the same place, but where another object is treasure. And I did struggle to find something here, so I've put this one in, which Steve may well recognise. It's the Bronnington hoard. That was a hoard of 15 medieval gold coins. We had 2 gold nobles and 13 silver coins, and also this amazing gold ring with a blue sapphire cabochon setting. Date of the hoard was 1457 to 1470, and again, once the museum has undergone its redevelopment, you should be able to get to see those. So this is great when it comes in to treasure, but there were also some gaps that needed to be filled, and the gap was highlighted by the discovery of a rather splendid cavalry helmet from the 2nd century. This is the Crosby Garrett helmet, which some of you may have heard of. Under the normal rules of treasure, it did not count as treasure because it's copper alloy, and as spectacular as it is, this actually wasn't protected. This was found up in Cumbria and is now in private hands, unfortunately. It underwent some rather severe reconstruction work, but is still a rather splendid object. There was also this group of objects that came up from North Yorkshire in May 2020. This is called the Rydale Hoard, and we have a bust of Marcus Aurelius there. It's a little statuette of Mars on horseback, lovely knife handle, or key, sorry, probably a key handle actually, in the form of a horse and a plumb bob. And so these amazing objects came through, And although they are clearly incredibly significant, both historically and archaeologically, they didn't actually qualify as treasure. And so technically there was no obligation on the part of the finder to record these whatsoever. And there was obviously a danger that this material, as important as it was about to be lost altogether. So in 2023, last year, a new class of treasure legislation came in, and this is an addition to the 1996 definition, and this is based on significance. There was a very lengthy consultation, and the bar has been set incredibly high for this new class of treasure, and it's been set deliberately very high, and we're not expecting to be overwhelmed with treasure cases. In actual fact, as of today, there is only one case that has gone through under the new significance definition, and that's a coin of Guthrum, I believe. And there's one being considered for Wales as well, which is also a coin. But this new criteria for significance, as I say, has to meet a very, very high standard, and it has to not meet the current treasure definition. It has to be partly metal, and it must be at least 200 years old when found. And that 200-year ruling was brought in from the Welsh side of the discussion, simply because there was quite a lot of industrial heritage in Wales that might actually then mean that there would be material in Wales that would qualify that probably wouldn't qualify in England. And only if those conditions are met would it then be considered against the very high bar. And what you must be able to demonstrate is one or more of these objects. So rarity is one of the criteria. So if you're finding something and your initial gut reaction is, wow, that is absolutely amazing, that really must be in a museum, that's probably very significant and it would be worth pursuing. Location is also important, because something that is important in, say, if you've got a lovely Anglo-Saxon brooch that's been found over in Lincolnshire, that's probably not very significant. But if you find one over here in Wrexham, all of a sudden you're thinking, yes, this is something special. Something is happening here for that object to be here. So the location is important. A connection with a particular person or place. And this is something that I need you to think about based on what you've heard previously. So, for example, if you were to find a copper alloy pin from Stratford-on-Avon that says, "Dearest Anne, with all my love, Will," you're probably looking at something that might be significant. I've dropped a very big hint there as to what might be coming. Or if it's part of a collection that ticks one or more of the objects above. At that point, we would consider it for significance. It's then a very long, lengthy process as to whether that object can actually then be taken on by a museum, and at that point the treasure process kicks in. So it's not intended to produce an awful lot of work, but we are expecting there to be one or two objects. So with that in mind, I'm going to show you this, and this is when I'm going to ask Rob to put his hands over his ears, because he won't want to hear this next bit. But had he found this object now, this would qualify as treasure under the new significance definition, because we have a named object to a specific person who we've already established is very, very important, and it's also significant in terms of location because of the name on it. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the ingot. You've known from Caroline and Steve's presentation sort of where it's found. It did end up in Wrexham Museum, which is absolutely amazing. It was one of the stars of the show. It's been on tour down to the British Museum. It went down for the Nero exhibition down at the BM. Once we'd actually got it in the museum at Wrexham, we were able to then sort of look at it more carefully as to what was going on with this and the inscription, and try and find out what was going on. We pulled in lots and lots of favours from lots of colleagues, and it was a great collaborative project, because not only were we able to work with Chester University, John Moores University has already been mentioned, but the University of Liverpool also got involved. This is the technician from University of Liverpool, and he's actually preparing the pig for some photographic work, he's got a camera set up, and what they do, they actually get to take lots and lots of pictures of the inscription from different angles. I'm a bit of a technophobe when it comes to this, so I don't know the actual details of how he does this, but JR is a wonderful technician, and he can manipulate all of these images to produce incredibly detailed photographs like this, and so you can then rotate it to get the light coming from different angles. And it ticked a lot of boxes, because not only did it actually get the pig looked at from our point of view, we wanted to know all about it, but it was great from the university's point of view to be able to try out this new technique that they'd got. And they had used it in the past on things like papyrus in their own collection. But this was looking in great detail at the surface of the pig, and it picked out all the details, because that inscription, as Steve mentioned, was absolutely unique. We've not seen this before, and with this kind of photographic work, you're able to see all the minute details of it. So we stitched together these images, and we've ended up with this, and you can see this amazing inscription. So you've got Prov at the beginning there, and then a name, Trebeb Maximo, and then the start of the legate to tell you where he came from. But the RTI images was able to pick out the stops, which marked the ends of the words, because there were parts of the inscription that we were struggling with, but you were able to pick out the stops so we could work out where the words ended, and also these amazing ligatures where they have pulled all of these together. So whoever was actually creating the inscription to sort of mark this object was clearly very, very well educated and was very good at getting this very lengthy inscription pulled together to put onto this object. And I've picked out Trebellis's name there, which I've done in colour on the screen, as you can see below, to show you how those ligatures work. So they've reversed some of the letters to be able to make them fit. So we've got Trebel Maximo for Trebellius's name. And of course, the important one, Mughal, wherever that is meant to be. And we've already had a suggestion as to where that was actually coming from. I realised I'm ad-libbing terribly, so just bear with me while I catch up to get all the good stuff. Okay. So yes, we had this ingot. So now what we wanted to do was to actually find out where it's from, where this Mughal might have been. So we were able to get isotope analysis done. We did chemical analysis for it, and Steve did actually show you the details of where that was from. And we think now probably Holkin Mountain or up in that area is a pretty good bet. But yes, this would definitely be new significance. So this talk of treasure is great, and it's only a very small part of what Portable Antiquities Scheme does. So what about the non-treasure items, and who do we actually work with? The vast majority of the archaeological work that's carried out in the UK, and I think this is probably true to say for the work that we do here in Wales as well, tends to focus on large development projects. It's been a bit unusual today to hear about research projects that we're all doing, but a lot of the work that archaeological units are concerned with are things like housing estates and things like HS2 and all the redevelopments of our towns and cities. And so the material that we generally get in to look at comes by default from those bigger habitation sites. What PAS offers us as archaeologists are finds from rural settings. It's the things in the fields. It's the everyday buckles and buttons that people lose. It's the coins that have dropped out of pockets and out of a purse with a hole in it. And if you're very lucky, you might find evidence of a site that has long since been lost to us, which is what we've been seeing this morning. And that's why, as FLOs, we are constantly going on to our finders about how important it is to be recording exactly where it is that you find your object. Once you've taken that object out of the ground, it starts to lose its importance from a historical point of view. And so we really need to make sure that we record that, even if there's no obvious context for it. Now, the largest community that we deal with PAS are metal detectorists. And but they are by no means the only communities that we work with. This is a graph that was taken from the Portable Antiquities Scheme database that shows the kind of the nature of the finds people from 2023. And you can see that the vast majority, sort of 84% of all the objects recorded on the PS database are from metal detectorists, which when you consider that the National Council for Metal Detectorists estimate they've got about between 39 and 45,000 detectorists out there, probably isn't a surprise to see that vast wedge of that pie there. However, having said that, only about 6,000 of those detectorists actually record on the database, so there is a bit of a mismatch there. But you've also got other people, you've got dog walkers, gardeners, people who have allotments, people who are mudlarking, that's mudlarking is when they're on riverbanks and that sort of thing, as well as controlled archaeological investigation. Occasionally we do get one or two, but not much. So we've got a vast amount of material, and by default, a lot of that is metal, but we do have some non-metal objects on the database, and these are things that are often found by eye by the detectorists. So what I thought I'd do to kind of, for the rest of my presentation, is to look at what has been found on the PAS database from the Wrexham Borough. And this is a map that gives you an indication of that 1,478 objects as of yesterday that have been recorded on the database. The database is an amazing research tool, whether you're a professional archaeologist or whether you're just an amateur archaeologist, historian that are interested. It's free to access, and you can go onto the database and look up your local postcode area. You can look at particular areas. You can look for object types if that's what you're after, or you can look for a particular spot, a particular area. And I've just done a map search on this for Wrexham. And this is what's popped up. Most of the objects, the find spots have little, whoops, sorry, let me go back again. There, where do I get the pointer is what I'm after. Sorry, told you I was a technophobe. Pointer, thank you. Oops. You have a lovely spot here if you've got a single object. By the time you get up to these coloured dots, they are when you've got more objects, and so they just build then. So they go from blue to gold to red, and you can see the kind of, we've got two hot spots here. This first one up here is around Holt and Farndon area, which is probably no surprise whatsoever. And we've also got another hot spot down here at Larnamon, which is mainly coins. And those two hotspots are mostly made up of coins. The one down in the southeast is made up of the Iron Age coins and Celtic coins from Wales. So that's where that is coming. You'll see on the list that I put at the bottom, we've got a very interesting category that says Greek and Roman provincial, which you're probably thinking that's a bit odd in Wrexham. And it is a little bit odd. Most of those coins, 22 of those 23, actually come from this group of coins here, but we've got one other that's sort of north Wrexham up here that is probably a fake, actually. Well, it's a very good fake, but it is a fake. So I'm going to go through period by period and just pick out one or two of my favourites. So we're starting with the Neolithic. All the dates are actually taken from the PAS database, and we have just 4 objects from the Neolithic. And what's interesting from putting all of these maps together is to show how the activity around Wrexham changes through time. So we've only got actually 3 spots here of sort of 4 objects from the Neolithic that have been recorded on the database. And one of them is a rather nice polished axe, 2,900, 2,100 BC. Beautiful stone axe that very similar to one that Ian was showing us earlier. A little bit more activity in the Bronze Age. We have a number of 32 objects, and they include socketed and flat axes, spearheads, rapiers and daggers, pole staves, and all of that sort of thing, and a single gold bead, which was actually declared treasure. as well. But it's interesting to see what's turning up. You're getting the axes and the spears and all of that sort of thing. But again, a nice kind of spread over the Wrexham area, but a lot more than you're getting in the earlier period. And I've just pulled out a rather nice late socketed axe. You've got a lovely loop on the side to help sort of attach it to the haft. These come up quite regularly all over Wrexham. They actually come up all over Wales. Actually, this is a rather plain one. Sometimes you get them with nice decoration on them, and there's a suggestion that these might have had details picked out in black. When it would have been new, this would have been very, very shiny, would have looked lovely. The Iron Age, we've got fewer objects from the Iron Age, but these tend to be brooches, 1 or 2 coins, some of these Triskel mounts or fobs as they're called, which is something that Chris mentioned earlier, and sort of toggles and that sort of thing. But again, a few Iron Age objects coming up. This is a very nice fob or Triskel mount that came up early Rome, sort of Iron Age, early Roman. We're not quite sure what these were, but they appear to have been attached to sort of horse harnesses and that sort of thing. This is not quite as nice as the one that Chris had, unfortunately, but hey. That's the one thing with the PAS database, and I joked about the funny little objects, but we deal with objects in kit form, because obviously these are objects that have broken and have been lost, as well as being damaged in the plough soil once they've been lost. So we don't tend to get the nicer things that you get off excavations, unfortunately. We also have a nice late Iron Age brooch as well. This would have had there's a coil there with a spring, and the pin would have come down to the catch plate here. These are very often missing, but this is quite a nice brooch. Would have been almost gold when new, and very different to the Roman ones that we actually see later. Now the Roman activity really takes off, and this is what Caroline and Steve were talking about. You've got these big hotspots. You've got a lot of activity over the Wrexham borough, and you're starting to get an awful lot more things that might suggest a habitation rather than actually passing through. I've just put 1 or 2 of the object types, classes of object down there, but we've got 836 objects recorded on the database. And again, bear in mind that that's only objects that have been volunteered for recording, so that's not everything that's out there, that's just the material that we know, just to give a bit of an indication. But again, you've got that hot spot up round Holt and Farndon, which probably isn't unexpected. Quite a lot of coins, 714 coins, and also 7 coin hoards that could range from just a handful of coins right through to larger coins. Lots of brooches. We've got spindle whorls as well, things that women would have been using. So we're looking at possible occupation. Weights as well that might have been used in the home. Strap fittings, pins and mounts, things that would have been mounted onto leather strapping. We've got pins for hair, cloak pins, and all of that sort of thing. So a whole range of material that are coming up from the Roman period. I picked just one rather nice brooch here. This is a brooch from sort of the first to mid-2nd century AD. Again, pins missing. They all come in kit form, unfortunately. You've got a little bit of the pin there, but you've got a really nice kind of stud at the top here. The safety pin of the Roman world, but really rather nice. And this, which is a cosmetic spoon, it would have had a twisted handle, and it might have been used as either for cosmetics or possibly for medicines. And this was actually found quite close to the villa site at Rosset. So again, you've got a lot of activity in that area that isn't just passing through. That indicates that somebody was actually living in and around there. By the time we move on to the early medieval period, it's a little bit thinner on the ground, but for all the reasons that we've been talking about this morning, things simply just don't survive very well. The Portable Antiquities scheme separates out early medieval from the main medieval period. So this covers the sort of sort of post-Roman right through to 1066. And we've got a mixture of items. Not many coins. I think there are actually only 3 coins from the early medieval period recorded on the database from this area, but you've got things like strap ends and brooches, and so personal objects as well, and also horse fittings. So we have another early Anglo-Saxon coin found here. Had I known that Ray was going to be in the audience, I'd have put his in here, but you've already seen one from Chris from Ray's coin, so this is another one. There is only one other. There are only 3 in total from the Wrexham area, but we're looking at sort of 8th century here. And this really rather nice strap end. Those cells that you can see in the object, we've got 4 rectangular cells and a circular one there, probably had coloured enamel in them, possibly dark blue or black. And again, when new, this is copper alloy, so it would have been really shiny and looked absolutely beautiful when it was new. And these sort of strap ends, if you imagine you've got your leather strapping, and it would have just been a weight at the end of the strap just to finish them off quite nicely. And this is a nice early one. Slightly more objects for the medieval period, 259 in total. Vast majority of these are coins again, but still a lot of personal objects, strap fittings, buckles, brooches, and seal matrices. We're seeing a lot of personal seals coming up as well, including and other things like finger rings, horse pendants. This is a rather nice seal matrix. It's made of lead, and it seems to be a particular style that you find in North Wales. They have a sort of a stylised sort of floral, foliage motif in the middle, and then with the inscription going round it. And this particular one says Llewellyn F. Griffith. So you've got a nice Welsh name. But what is interesting about this is that they have given the contraction of F for Phil, which is Latin, not Welsh, which would be app. Some of them have the full Welsh one, but this is a mixture of Welsh and Latin. So if you go backward, you've got Llewellyn going around there, and it starts with the S, seal of Llewellyn. And these are nice personalised ones that you get, as I say, particularly in North Wales. And spindle whorls, which I had to put this in for my volunteer. I think this is one of the ones that she actually edited for me. She's particularly into spindle whorls. Really, really nice female object, something that a lot of women would have used. They come in various sizes. Some of them are decorated with just linear sort of geometric patterns like this one. Some have inscriptions around them, often these what we call pseudo-script, so it's intended to look like real script, but it's gobbledygook, it doesn't actually say anything. But these are found all over the place. And what's interesting is in Rossett, where we were looking at the medieval field systems just to the south of the brook, there was quite a large concentration of medieval spindle whorls in that field just behind there, which might actually indicate the continuation of use of that site into the medieval period, which would fit in with the building. So PAS data is linking in to the sites that we know and telling us more about what may have been going on in the area. Post-medieval, my period, lots of activity. We have 265 objects. We've got a bit of a dilemma in the PAS land with post-medieval material because a lot of it is dated after the point at which we have our nominal cut-off date. Because of capacity in the PAS scheme, there is a limit to how much we can actually record. It's not because it's not there, and it's not because we don't want to. It's just that there simply aren't enough hours in the day, and so we have to put a stop at some point. As the post-medievalist, I would record everything, and so I tend to focus on objects that tell a story, objects that are slightly different. And I have recorded, as you'll see shortly, objects that are really very, very late in PAS terms. But it's really important that we record these objects. Metal detectorists use detectors now that are absolutely amazing. They detect quite deep into the ground. They can discriminate between the types of metal that they're actually detecting. But what they don't do is to say, that's a post-medieval object, I'm not going to take it out of the ground. I'm going to leave it there for future archaeologists. That doesn't happen. So once that object is taken out of the ground, my argument would be that we should have some way of recording that. And the PAS are actually now trying to think about ways in which we can improve the recording of this later material, because quite clearly there is a lot of material there. But the other thing, and this is a bit of a plug for the university students here, we have a huge body of data on the PAS database for the post-medieval period. About a third of the material that we record is post-medieval on there, believe it or not. Now, in the overall scheme of things, that's only a drop in the ocean of the amount of post-medieval material we have out there. But what we don't get is students researching post-medieval objects. And so there's a real mismatch between what's going on. And if we had the research into the post-medieval stuff, we would then be able to argue for recording more. That's an unblatant plug, and I apologise for that. So let's look at some post-med objects. I had to put this in for various reasons. Those of you who know me know that I am kind of orbiting around the centre of the pipe universe, and so this is a pipe stopper or pipe tamper for tamping your tobacco down into your pipe. This particular type is called a ring tamper, and they came in the kind of mid-17th century, made famous probably by Hogarth's illustration, Modern Midnight Conversation, where a number of the people in that illustration, dated 1733, are wearing these ring tampers. They often had a motif on the top, a seal, so that they could be used as a seal nectar as well. Very, very uncomfortable to wear it as a ring and then have the tamper, but there we go. Ours is not to reason why. And this, which I would actually commend my finder, this is a stirrup, and they were determined to find nearly every piece, so we were able to do a really nice reconstruction. So I just thought that was a great object to come in, and it actually looked like something when it was all put back together. Now, I said that we don't record much material, but this is me and one of my counterparts over the border in Shropshire who have recorded these more modern material. There's not an awful lot, simply because detectorists don't bring them forward. But I just wanted to put in a couple, just to show you that it was the story that appealed to me for this one. This is a candlestick, and the reason I put it in was it's a rather nice candlestick. It's got this kind of Rococo type style. And it's dated 1810 to 1850, which is great when you consider where it came from. It's from the grounds that are associated with a Methodist Calvinistic chapel, just on the south side and south of the Wrexham borough, and it's almost certainly something that would have been used within the chapel. And the chapel went out of use in the early 1990s, but they had a refit in the mid-1800s, and I suspect that that actually got ditched when they were revamping. And finally, I could not finish a talk on PAS without a clay tobacco pipe. So here's my token clay tobacco pipe. But this is a nice one. It is very late. It's sort of 1860 to 1910, so it is quite late. But you can see that the initials on the side of the spur it's AC, it actually is. We don't know who the maker is, but we're working on it. But the orientation of the lettering is something that is actually peculiar to North East Wales. And there is a suspicion that this is probably made by a local maker. And given that Wrexham was a known centre for pipe making, it's probably a local product. This is the database. If you're going up and having a look at it, please do. As I say, it's free to access, and it's really, really very good. It's fascinating what you will actually find. It's really, really useful. We work alongside finders to encourage them to record objects. We like to think about the stories that are behind the objects, from that lost brooch to the lost buckle, the coin hoard. We try to engage with communities where these objects are found, to be able to get them to think about the past lives that may have shaped that immediate world in which we live. And we are trying to inspire younger younger generations, sometimes even older generations, to learn about those past peoples whose footsteps we've all tread. And we like to preserve, at least by record, our shared past for future generations. All over England and Wales, engagement events are happening throughout the year, and so there's plenty of opportunities to get involved, and I know HENEB are particularly keen to encourage you to do that. So it's a very, very powerful resource that is open to anyone, and so, let's do what we can to preserve that past, and, it really is fascinating what you can find buried beneath your feet. Thank you very much indeed.